Whether it's nostalgia for older movies and a time gone by, a connection to the analog process, an intuitive feeling, or even just following a trend. Many people love the look and feel of film. Personally, I realised I had an affinity to this look when Blackmagic released their original cinema camera back in 2012. An affordable cinema camera that didn't just shoot a high quality image, but also a filmic one. Growing up with point and click film cameras and watching movies shot on motion picture film, it felt like I was finally able to connect what I saw in my head to the image I was getting from the camera. This set me down the path of film emulation, trying to replicate the colours and tones of film using LUTs, my own processes, and a combination of the two. I also started shooting film with photography, which is a much cheaper way to get this feeling than it is with a moving image. And it gave me the opportunity to experiment with the analog process without breaking the bank. As newer, more affordable, more sophisticated and higher resolution cameras are released, I find I'm a bit disconnected from the images produced by them. As beautiful as they are, and as much flexibility as you can get from these sensors, I don't always get that same internal satisfaction from the final images, as I've had from my old Blackmagics for a number of years. Now, not being able to feel fully satisfied with the look and feel of an image from a particular camera is partly down to me, my own biases toward a particular look, and more importantly, my lack of knowledge into the intricate processes of replicating and emulating the characteristics of film. Dehancer is an OFX plugin for DaVinci Resolve, and all of the clips you saw at the start of this video were color graded using Dehancer's film emulation tools. The team over at Dehancer have currently sampled 62 film stocks, both motion picture and photographic, and interpreted them for use with their plugin. And the results you can achieve with these emulations are, in my opinion, a step above any other film emulation software that I've seen currently on the market at this price point. Not only do we get the film stock emulation itself, but a whole host of ways to control that film stock, replicating the way in which the photochemical process of film development works and how it looks. Not to mention, there's no reason that you can't use these tools with photos as well as video. So let's take a look at the plugin to see how it works to achieve such an accurate film look and feel. It's a good idea to white balance your image correctly for your selected film stock. For example, Kodak 200T is a tungsten balanced film stock, so we set our white balance to 3200 Kelvin. Kodak 250D is a daylight balanced film stock, so we set our white balance to 5600 Kelvin. This ensures an accurate representation of the colour of the particular film stock that we're using. We have the option to push or pull the film. This mimics the process in which underexposed film stock is developed for a longer period of time than intended, or overexposed film stock is developed for a shorter period of time than intended. Because film needs to be developed for a specific length of time depending on the ISO of the particular film, exposure of negative film can be a little different when compared to digital. Pushing and pulling positive film, however, works in a more familiar way, and Dehancer also emulates this. These two exposure and development techniques when using actual film can be used out of necessity or for a creative look, and it's great that we've got the option to replicate this. Under Expand, we can adjust our black and white points to fit our film stock into the dynamic range of our timeline color space. followed by adjustments to our print section, which all function in the way analog media would. We can tweak the film stock's exposure, tonal contrast, colour density, and saturation. We can go between tonal contrast and our black and white points to get the level of contrast we want in the image without clipping the shadows or highlights. Checking analog range limiter will compress our black and white points into the points measured on the film stock's reference prints, helping toward a more accurate representation of the printed film and allowing you more room to get rid of any possible clipping. Dehancer adjusts colours in the same way an analog colour head does during the printing process, and whilst it's based off of a photographic process rather than a motion picture process, it achieves the exact same results that you would see when using printer lights with motion picture stock. So in our example, we'd like something a little warmer to better represent the time of day that we shot the scene. If we push in some red, our image now has a little too much magenta, so we can push in some green to compensate. To polish it off, we'll add in a touch of yellow. By default, Dehancer preserves exposure while colour head adjustments are made. But if we want our image to be as faithful to the film process as possible, we can turn it down to 0. This way, when we make colour adjustments, our exposure will also be decreased or increased, depending on the colour that we change, just like it does in the analog printing process. One of the things I like most about this plugin, and what really sets it apart from other film emulations, is the film grain. This is one of the key elements that makes film look like film. Rather than a film grain scan used as an overlay like most film grain plugins, Dehancer uses an algorithm based on the way real grain works on photographic emulsion. The details in the image itself dictate the grain, so rather than just an overlay placed on top of the frame, Dehancer's grain relates to the colour and brightness contained in the image, appearing as if it's part of the originally recorded image, like our digital image is actually scanned film stock. Another important element to the film look is halation. Halation is an artifact that mainly occurs when shooting film with motion picture cameras. It appears around the brightest parts of an image, depending on how the image has been exposed, and a level of contrast around that bright point. Still photography cameras generally have anodized or black painted film plates to prevent the light that's coming into the camera when the shutter is open from bouncing back and adding more exposure to the film. Whereas motion picture cameras don't have this. Instead, motion picture film stock has an anti-halation layer on the film base itself. This helps to stop the light that's coming into the camera from bouncing back and affecting the exposure of the film. But this layer isn't completely black, which means it still reflects some of the brightest points in the image, and this is where we see the halation effect. Colour film generally involves 3 layers in the colour separation process, capturing blue, green and red light. And as the red layer is closest to the anti-halation layer, where the light is bouncing back and scattering onto the emulsion, we get the typical red look of halation. And Dehancer gives us all the tools to fine-tune how this halation appears around the brighter parts of our image. Bloom is a characteristic not necessarily related to film itself, but the imperfections of a particular lens. An older lens may have less anti-reflective coating than a newer one, or even no coating, causing a diffused glowing effect around bright light sources and contrasty edges. Dehancer's bloom tool is a little different compared to using a mist filter on the digital sensor, which is just an optical effect. Dehancer emulates the way film grain exaggerates bloom and gives us complete control over how this looks on our image. Film breath allows us to emulate typical exposure, contrast, and colour changes that can occur between different frames of film, which happen due to imperfections during film development, lower quality coating on the film, or issues with the camera shutter itself. Gateweave emulates the subtle movement of the image that is recorded when film feeds through a film window, scanner, or projector. Both of these effects are more pronounced on amateur film productions, with cheaper cameras, smaller film size, and less expertise in the development process. But even on bigger budget 35mm or even 70mm movies, you'll find you can actually catch these two byproducts of the analog process more often than you'd expect. Interstellar is one film in particular I recommend you check out to see both of these effects in their native format. It's worth noting that Dehancer doesn't currently offer an option to replicate the process of printing negative film to print film stock within the plugin. This is generally what you might recognise as Kodak 2383 print film stock, which provides the sort of contrast and tones you see in many modern productions shot on film. However, there are ways to do this in Resolve. You could use the Color Space Transform tool to convert your Dehancer film stock into Cineon, and then simply add one of Resolve's built-in film print LUTs. This may not be the most accurate workaround, but Dehancer are currently working on an option to emulate the look of a final film print within the plugin, which is great. All these subtle and not so subtle characteristics of film all make for a subconscious reminder when we view film that what we're seeing is light being captured to a physical medium, something that we've lost a little with a digital image, and I think Dehancer does an amazing job at emulating this feeling. With camera technology advancing and offering us ease of use, more features, and more flexibility at prices we can actually afford, film still stays somewhat out of reach for the enthusiast or lower budget filmmaker. Teams like Dehancer are doing an incredible job giving us the feeling of film through emulation, granting us the means to achieve a film look and feel with the flexibility of modern, affordable digital cameras. And whilst the thought of putting the effort into dirtying up a beautiful, sharp, modern image might seem a bit counterproductive to some, for me personally, film encapsulates the beautiful, imperfect nature of time, memory, and reality in a tangible form. And sometimes I felt held back from creating that feeling in my own work due to barriers like money and a lack of specialist knowledge. So a special thanks to the team at Dehancer for making such an awesome product and giving us the chance to learn about and emulate this process in our work. You can get 10% off of Dehancer when you use my code ROBELLIS. If you'd like to support my channel and get exclusive lighting and shoot breakdowns, along with early and extended YouTube videos, head over to my Patreon. I use music from AudioSocket in my videos. Click my referral link in the video description and use the code ROBELLIS when you sign up for a free month of the best and most diverse range of stock music available. Use my code ROBELLIS over at Zyro to get up to 72% off your website or storefront with 3 extra months free with 1 year, 2 year, or 4 year plans, along with a custom domain for a year. I use ArtGrid for stock footage. Get an extra 2 months free when you sign up, using the link in the video description.